Alright, today we're going to learn about Cold War conflicts. We have 5 daily objectives. Number 1, explain why the USA engaged in various conflicts during the Cold War. Number 2, explain why Mao Zedong won the Chinese Civil War. Number 3, list the outcomes of the Korean War. Number 4, describe the peace process that prevented nuclear war during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And number 5, explain the post-World War II consequences of imperialism. So we've talked about this before. This is the division of Europe. It's also kind of the dividing line along with the rest of the world. We've got the red represented by the Soviet Union and communism. We've got green represented by the United States and democracy. We can see the Iron Curtain here where it divides Europe, but it also divides the rest of the world as well, not just Europe. Review Soviet goals. The Soviets want to build a buffer between the Soviet Union and Western Europe. They've been beaten up by Germany twice, and they don't want to do it a third time. They also want to spread communism. They think communism is the best ideology in the whole wide world, and that it is the way the people's lives are going to get better. On the flip side, we've got U.S. goals. The USA is terrified of and wants to limit Soviet expansion. It decides on a policy of containment to keep communism and the Soviet Union from spreading anywhere else in the world. And the United States believes in domino theory. Once one country becomes communist, another will soon follow. Therefore, that country must be contained everywhere possible. And then we talked about MAD. And MAD is just the idea that if you nuke me, I'll nuke you, and everybody's dead. One country with nukes, like the USA, is not going to mess with another country with nukes, like the Soviet Union, or the whole world will end, and nobody wants that. But that doesn't mean they can't fight. They just have to fight in different ways. And finally, we have Africa and Asia. Africa and Asia, remember, they were, for the most part, European colonies. Those colonies have gained independence or are gaining independence as the Cold War goes on. And now they have to find a new way. They have to build governments. They have to figure out how independence is going to work, who has what rights. Those are the problems they have to solve. And some of them are going to turn towards communism. Some are going to turn towards democracy and capitalism. It just depends on the country. Let's talk about China. So World War II ends and the Chinese Civil War is renewed. We've got communists versus nationalists. Mao Zedong and the communists, Chiang Kai-shek and the nationalists. Thanks to Mao's promise of free land, peasants began joining the communist side in droves. Finally, in 1947, the Chinese Civil War ends in a victory for the communists and Mao Zedong. China becomes a communist country. Now, the nationalists maintain control of Taiwan, a Chinese island, and are still there today, and they are backed by the United States. This has always been a potential flashpoint between communist China and the United States, is Taiwan, and whether China is going to try to ever reassert its authority over Taiwan or not. Mao signs a treaty of friendship with the Soviet Union in 1950, and to the United States it seems like Asia has officially gone red. China is the biggest, baddest country in Asia, always has been, except for that moment in World War II with Japan. So it seems like once China's gone red, everybody's going red, and that scares the United States. Here's a map. We can see China here, Japan's over here. This is Taiwan. So this is the one little piece of China that is not communist. The rest of it is all communist. So Mao begins to tighten control. He's got China under his thumb, and now he's going to make it truly communist. Private companies are nationalized. What that means is the government takes over all of the businesses. China industrialized. They begin building factories, and peasants start moving to cities to work. So you've got less farming. China's output of coal, cement, steel, and electricity increased dramatically, but at a high cost. So they are industrializing, but that cost is very, very high. One of the costs is just coming up. In 1958, Mao launches the Great Leap Forward, where collective farms are formed into communes with 15,000 acres and 25,000 farmers each. 20 million people die of starvation as a result of collectivized farms. So are they industrializing? Yes. Are they industrializing very, 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 very exceptionally quickly? Yes. But the toll on human life and sacrifice is enormous. Let's talk about modern day China for a second. After the death of Mao and collapse of the Soviet Union, China's leaders needed a new way forward. They turned to what is called capitalism with Chinese characteristics. In reality, what this means is that China is a capitalist country under the control of a communist party. For all intents and purposes, China is an oligarchy. You have a group of people, the Communist Party, and they are dictators. They are in charge of the country. But the country does have a capitalist economic system, not a communist one. And this is the modern president of China who is quickly approaching dictator level. let's talk about Korea. So prior to World War II, Korea was an absolute monarchy. Unfortunately for Korea, it was conquered by Japan pretty early, and I think it was in 1938. We can see how close Korea is to Japan, and then how close Korea is to China, so it's kind of like a halfway point. The Japanese were very, very harsh to Koreans. They considered them as inferiors. The Japanese did not respect anyone that surrendered, so they treated them not so nice. Korea is industrialized by the Japanese in order to strengthen the Japanese economy. North Korea especially has a lot of coal, which is why Japan wanted it. The southern part of Korea is freed from Japan by the U.S. The northern half is freed by the Soviet Union. You can see how close the Soviet Union is to Korea, much closer to the United States. So a democratic form of government is established in the south and a communist one in the north. And then one Korea, what was Korea, was now divided at the 38th line of latitude. It's called the 38th parallel, right about here, and creating two distinct countries. But North Korea is not what they want. Going back to the map for a second, you need to realize the Soviet Union is communist, China is communist. It's just a hop, skip, and a jump, and Korea is communist. So communist North Korea wants to extend to South Korea and make it communist as well. So the Soviet Union is supplying North Korea with guns, tanks, airplanes, money, all kinds of cool stuff to conquer South Korea and unify the peninsula under communism. On June 25th, 1950, North Korea crosses the 38th parallel and invades South Korea in a surprise attack. They make it almost to the end. They almost completely conquer South Korea. Under the new USA strategy of containment, communism everywhere must be stopped. Look at this propaganda poster over here. It's your choice. Where do you draw the line against communist aggression? Then you can see South Korea right there. There's the line. That's the 38th parallel. UN troops under the command of the USA pursued North Korea troops past the 38th all the way to the Yalu River, which is actually the border between North Korea and China. So there's a total reversal. The United States gets involved. Next thing you know, American troops have pushed back the North Koreans almost all the way to the Chinese border. This terrifies communist China. Absolutely terrifies them. They think America, why would America stop Korea? Why not just go ahead and take all of China? So communist China orders the attack on Korea of Chinese forces, and millions of Chinese forces start fighting U.S. and UN forces, and eventually push UN forces back across the 38th parallel. So North Korea's up here. They go all the way almost to the bottom. The United States jumps in and pushes them all the way back to the top. And then the Chinese come in and then push them all the way back to the bottom again. Lots of back and forth. Here's a much better map of what I just said. Here you can see this red line is when the North Koreans pushed down all the way to almost Busan. This was all that was left of South Korea. And then when the United States got involved, they actually landed in Incheon, which was actually the last amphibious invasion the U.S. has ever done, and then pushed all the way back to the river, the Yalu River. And then the Chinese got involved and then pushed them all the way back down. So that was a mess. July 1953, the UN forces in North Korea sign a ceasefire agreement that says North Korea and South Korea will remain two separate and distinct countries. Their border remained at 38th parallel. 4 million soldiers and civilians died with no real political change. We've got 4 million dead people, and the way things were before is the way they stayed. Korea remains divided to this day along the 38th. North Korea remains one of the last communist countries on Earth ruled by the Kim family. This is Kim Jong-un over here on the right. His dad ruled before him, Kim Jong-il, and his dad ruled before that, Kim Jong-sun, I believe. So it's really it's almost a monarchy, to be honest, but it really considered a dictatorship. Now let's talk about Cuba. 1950s, Cuba was ruled by an unpopular dictator by the name of Batista. This is Batista over here. He was an army general. Batista's government is a client state of the United States. What that means is Batista and Cuba pretty much does whatever the U.S. tells them to. Cuba was the old Las Vegas. Before Las Vegas was invented, people went to Cuba. It was the playground of America's rich. Prostitution, gambling, drugs, they could all be found in Batista's Cuba, which is basically the backyard of the United States. The Cuban people were hungry and starved as they watched rich Americans eat cake. January 1959, with the support of the Cuban people, Fidel Castro overthrows Batista, and Castro turns to the Soviet Union for support. This is Fidel Castro. He was a big cigar guy. Cuba's known for its cigars. This leads us to the Bay of Pigs invasion. So Cuba's been lost to the U.S. The U.S. wants to get it back. 1960, the CIA begins to train anti-Castro Cuban exiles. These are Cubans. They want to go back to Cuba and put Batista back in charge and maybe make it a democracy. They invade at the Bay of Pigs, and the entire invasion relied on U.S. air support, and the U.S. does not show up. The exiles are totally annihilated by Castro's soldiers. This humiliates the United States and pushes Cuba even closer to the Soviet Union. And as a result, in July 1962, the Soviet Union begins building 42 secret nuclear missile sites in Cuba. The problem with this is that if you put nuclear missile sites in Cuba, those missiles can now reach the United States. Most of the missiles in the Soviet Union at this point could not reach the United States. They can now because the technology is better, but back then you needed weapons to be pretty close. Cuba was close enough. These threats are discovered by a U.S. spy plane, and John F. Kennedy declares these missiles are a threat to the United States because, again, for the first time, the United States is in range of nuclear weapons, and this is terrifying. Here we can see this is actually one of the photos taken by the spy plane of the sites. Missile transporters, Skyline missiles. You can see the whole shebang. So USA orders a naval blockade of Cuba. Basically, they take the U.S. Navy and they put it around Cuba and says nobody can enter. The idea is they're going to prevent the Soviet Union from bringing even more missiles and supplies to Cuba. This makes the Soviet Union and Cuba very angry, and the world is on the brink of nuclear warfare. This is the closest we ever got to all-out annihilation. And a last-ditch effort, the USA and Soviet Union, they negotiate, and the USA agrees to remove nuclear missiles from Turkey near the Soviet Union if the Soviet Union agrees to remove the missiles from Cuba, which they do. This prevents a nuclear disaster, nuclear winter, and really the end of society as we knew it. We can see here a picture of Cuba, and these are all the places that those nuclear weapons could reach. I mean, they could reach basically the entire United States. And here we've got John F. Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev, who is in charge of the Soviet Union at this point. And they're kind of arm wrestling, sitting on their missiles. This is a good political cartoon of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Lastly is Vietnam. Vietnam was a colony of France prior to World War II. A guy by the name of Ho Chi Minh turns to the Soviet Union to help Vietnam gain independence from France. This pays off for Ho Chi Minh. France suffers a huge defeat at Dien Bien Phu, and they withdraw from Vietnam. The problem is Ho Chi Minh's a communist. He's supported by the Soviet Union, and now we see a communist Vietnam. We got to remember, containment theory, domino theory. If we fail to intervene, next thing you know, all of these countries will become communist too. So the United States jumps in. For a moment, Vietnam is actually divided into two countries, North Vietnam, which is communist, South Vietnam, which is not communist, just like Korea. But this doesn't last but a minute. Armed communists in South Vietnam called the Viet Cong. This is Ho Chi Minh over on the right. Immediately begin using hit-and-run tactics on South Vietnamese and U.S. forces. The Gulf of Tonkin incidents, where some American destroyers are destroyed, supposedly by the North Vietnamese, but nobody really knows for sure, convinces Congress that war is necessary. By 1965, we got 185,000 U.S. soldiers in Vietnam. We are doomed to lose this war, and there are a number of reasons. Number one, the South Vietnamese government is unpopular. It's run by a dictator. Even though Ho Chi Minh is a dictator and communist, the people feel like they picked him because they support him and because he's been fighting the French and their colonial oppressors for so long. American troops are fighting in a unfamiliar jungle. This is not something they've been trained for or used to by any means. The war becomes increasingly unpopular in the USA, and in 1973, Richard Nixon pulls the last U.S. soldiers out of Vietnam. In 1975, Vietnam becomes one communist country. 58,000 Americans and 1.5 million Vietnamese die for that conclusion. Take a couple minutes and answer your 4 daily objectives.